What are you hoping everyone that's here today walks away with?
Well, I think one thing the NAACP is really proud to see is that we as citizens and as just people here in America getting together and joining forces and saying that enough is enough, and that we'd like to see positive change, and that we can cross our differences to address issues that are common to us. And so I think today is really just important for those reasons.
I'd like to thank you, every single person who felt strongly enough to take the time out of the middle of their day to be here. Your presence is proof that what we have to say is important. I'm here for one reason and one reason only. My brother, Captain Brian Babb, was shot and killed by the Eugene Police Department on March 30th. They lacked the proper protocol, communication skill, and training to respond with knowledgeable mindfulness needed to negotiate a veteran suffering from an invisible disability that he'd acquired by defending our freedom. Thank you, Brian. Brian was strong. Brian was dynamic. Brian was injured. It was hard for him to go to the Veterans Administration office to ask for help because he saw men and women with limbs missing, visible scars, and a quiet courage of their fate. My brother Babb was intelligent, intuitive, and protective. He was as good as he was bad, but if I ever needed anyone on my side, he'd be the man I'd want next to me. He taught me to defend myself. He thought it was important. I never imagined in a million years I'd be the one defending him. I speak personally, but there hasn't been a thought, action, or emotion that my family hasn't been there to support, cry, and work toward a solution to this horrific tragedy. We have created the perfect storm to fight the injustice that seems to plague the very people who have sacrificed everything for us to have a better life. The irony is they come home to lose theirs. Alex Gardner and Pete Kearns are just the two first names that come to mind when I think of sellouts. I understand politics, laws, public approval are important to maintain a position you believe will help the people until you start killing them. How do you reconcile the justification you tell yourself before you fall asleep at night? Alex Gardner, I know this must have been a horrible incident of damage control for you, but my family and I have paid an acute attention to the inconsistent accounts of the events leading to my brother's murder, and our diligent and painstaking attention to detail has only led to one conclusion. You're hoping we'll go away because we have more facts than you do and what you bothered to investigate. You panicked just as Will Stutzman did. Pete Kearns, I'm confounded. I'm a little embarrassed for you as well, that you thought you could use my brother's name, the name Babb, 13 times in an article when you were so painfully trying to rectify the situation. Don't use my brother's name as a platform for PR. Own it. What I will say is there is a solution. It began when people started listening and recognizing a system that has broke down. An overzealous militaristic response to situations that begs for a better solution. We the people pay our law enforcement to keep the peace. When that fails, we fix it. It's time to make a law to mandate a standardized protocol for all domestic law enforcement across the nation to utilize a specialized task force working in conjunction with outsourced veterans specializing in crisis training to respond to veterans in distress. This would be Brian's bill. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Richardson, and then we have a few guest speakers, veterans, who'd like to say something. Thank you so much.
As you saw, that was a heartfelt plea for action. As you may know, I was involved in an incident that had similarities to this case, even though it's minute compared to the case of Captain Babb, in that no one's life was lost. But just because someone's life was lost doesn't mean we don't take action. We need to stop it when we see it, and that goes for all injustices. My nephew got into the situation he was in because of a brain injury. But this brain injury wasn't on the combat field. It was actually on a basketball court, a sport that doesn't even require headgear. But he was injured, and which led to his situation. When I witnessed what happened, and then I read the article in the Register Guard recently, I couldn't help but notice the similarities in two things: a breakdown in communication, a lack of communication, and the idea that our best and primary tool is force. I think that we can do better than that. And it's a very sad tribute to our nation that we're sitting here talking about the death of a veteran. And in fact, in this town, I just had a conversation earlier about our Vietnam veterans, who we don't know the numbers, but we know in great numbers they're on the streets of our city right now. And so the idea of having a society that allows this to happen, but at the same time, we know that our society is built on their courage and their sacrifice. So what we need to do is be able to sacrifice some of that hard-earned money and put it on the table to help our brother countrymen. And that's not really a sacrifice. You don't get to take your money with you when you die, but you take your heart. And that's where it lies. That's the test. What are we doing? What are we going to be able to say at that point? But anyway, I'd just like to thank the Babb family for having me here. I think that was a wonderful gesture on their part to say that all lives matter, and that even though the NAACP is recognized and thought of as an organization that deals with black lives and black issues, in fact, I just want to set the record straight. The NAACP deals with the issue of the United States of America. The spirit of the United States of America, the conscience of the United States of America, the Constitution. So we just wanted to say that Brian's bill is the proper way for citizens to get change, but we have to keep agitating as well. We have to be on the street, and in fact, we have to also partner with the institutions that be. And so we will do that as community members and as community organizations. I see the CALC is here and other organizations are here that have been doing this work, Human Rights Commission. And so we want to gather all these people together, all this energy that we have, and keep moving forward to make sure that something does change in a positive way for our people here in Eugene, in the state, and in the United States. Because mental health issues aren't going away. People are going to need help in many different avenues, and it's going to take a caring society, and that's all we're asking for here. And we want accountability. When something goes wrong, we need acknowledgement that it has gone wrong so that we can move forward. But anyway, thank you all for coming here. The NAACP stands with the Babb family and all people who seek dignity and justice here in the United States. Thanks.
If a few of you have noticed, I want to point out the American flag is upside down for a purpose. It means distress. So there is a reason for that. Thank you. And this is my mother, Wanda Holloway.
Thank you all for showing up. I wish Brian could see this. He would be. I said thank you all for showing up. I'm so proud of you guys, and Brian would be too. I have a very, very short statement to say that when my son was shot, there were 2 fingers on that trigger. The police finger and the Veterans Administration finger. They have done nothing to back up our veterans and the PTSD patients. We do not have enough counselors. The police are not medical providers. As a retired nurse, and my daughter's a nurse, I am telling you, they have no business responding to PTSD or attempt suicide. We must have the veterans trained by the Veterans Administration that will go out and soldier to soldier. They will take care of each other. They do it in war, they'll do it in peace. And we expect the Veterans Administration to pay for it. And that is my push until the day I die, is that the Veterans Administration will take more responsibility. They don't even like us to know that 22 young people a day are being killed. 22. One person closer? Okay. One person every 65 minutes. That's their figures. They don't like it out in the news because they promote that it will cause more suicides rather than less. And I say that is bull. We need to hear those figures. 22 people. Right now, more young people have killed themselves or been killed by police than was killed in the whole Iraq war. We need to see that every day in the newspaper. That is a horrendous number. And the Veterans Administration is responsible for those numbers, and it is almost impossible to get those numbers out of them because they don't like keeping those numbers. I thank you very much. Keep my son in your prayers, and we'll keep working.
I was an Army psychologist during the Vietnam War. And Stephanie referred to Chief Kern's article mentioning Brian's name 13 times. Of course, the purpose of Chief Kern's article seemed to me to assure us all that Brian provided an important, valuable learning experience for the Eugene Police Department. First, he said, they finally learned not to interrupt a conversation between a person in crisis and a mental health professional. Great insight. This particular mental health professional was a licensed clinical social worker, which involves, 6 years of higher education and 2,000 hours of supervised clinical experience, passing a 4-hour test. On top of that, she had 20 years of experience in a 9-month relationship with Babb. But the Eugene Police Department, to substitute basically an amateur, and in my view, very incompetent, so-called crisis negotiator. So the second lesson that Chief Kern assures us that they've learned is that some veterans will react badly to an armored vehicle. Wow, now isn't that news? So what is it that replaced elemental common sense in the Eugene Police Department? Well, this brought to mind a conversation that Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, had soon after 9/11 with another general at the Pentagon. And the general calls him in and says, General Clark, we're planning to attack Iraq. And Clark says, well, why? And the general says, I guess they don't know what else to do. We got a good military and we can take down governments. I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. And that's exactly what I see, here in River City, with a militarized police department, like militarized police all over the United States now. Nothing was so grotesque an expression of this than the EPD pulling up in this bearcat. Now, a bearcat is not a real animal. It's not a friendly, totem like a duck or a beaver. Bearcat is an acronym, and it stands for Ballistic Engineered Armored Response Counterattack Truck. Now, isn't that a real smart thing to pull up in front of the house of a PTSD suffering combat veteran from Afghanistan? Now, this kind of decision has to involve, this is a militaristic decision that has to involve militaristic thinking. So I'm quoting a few of the things that were reported in the Register Guard's journalistic autopsy of this. One sergeant referred to, this is a deep panhandle lot. It would be nice to come up on armor. The panhandle lot was terrible from a, quote, tactical standpoint. We would have to start working on an exit strategy. That's when he told them to get off his property and go away. They're going to start thinking about an exit strategy instead of just putting the damn thing in reverse and leaving. And then Sergeant McAlpine decided to consult a, quote, special weapons and tactics team commander. Now, as a former therapist, it's absolutely unbelievable that anybody would speak this way or think this way. Okay. So how would this predictively affect a combat veteran? Well, first of all, three principal symptoms of PTSD are intrusion, avoidance, and hyperarousal. And if you understand what PTSD is, it's when people have suffered a psychological trauma, means an intolerable state of emotion, that is inescapable and uncontrollable. Now, intrusion is the return of these states of mind. It's not just a memory, it's a return of the total state of mind that blends itself with an immediate situation. So the victim basically loses track of discriminating between the past and the present emotionally. Hyperarousal is another symptom. We saw that immediately in Captain Babb. The minute he heard that voice coming over that loudspeaker, he immediately experienced hyperarousal. So that's the time for the police to get the hell out. Now, Stephanie also, someone mentioned that this incredible string of communication miscues. Now, that's not unpredictable. The errors in verbal communication have been documented and studied for half a century. They're written up in every, basic management textbook that everyone in charge of any kind of public management should be thoroughly familiar with. And there are three variables that degrade the fidelity of oral communication. One is situational ambiguity, which we had there. Another is elevated anxiety, which was in abundance there. And another is the number of people involved in the communication network. So this was a completely incompetent, bungled operation. Where the fact that Brian had fired a gun apparently into the ceiling or the floor, he did not fire it out the window. There's an immediate communication error from the call taker to the dispatcher. The dispatcher sends out the message that he fired it possibly through a window. Now, that mistake was corrected within 30 seconds by the call taker, and that information never got out to the officers in the field. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, so they call this Bearcat in, and it pulls up, and within 3 minutes of that Bearcat pulling up, there's a guy, a supposed crisis negotiator named Gross, who's screaming at Brian through a loudspeaker to come out. Now let's look at the situation. In a PTSD event, the effort is to regain control. The emotion is uncontrollable, both within and without in this case. He's struggling to control an emotional reaction within. His therapist is attempting to help him do that. The external situation was under control. There was no problem. He's in his own house. He had a friendly roommate there, and he's talking to a therapist that he is connected with on the phone. No problem externally until the police intrude. Now there's an external crisis piled upon the internal crisis. And Brian tells him to go away. I'm not coming out. I'm not a criminal. Basically, you have no warrant. You have no right to be here. You have no right to come on my property. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah. I'm very honored to have Kathleen come up here. This has been very hard for her, and I'm very appreciative. She's family.
Hello, my name's Kathleen, and I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. And I'm afraid to call my therapist after hours because of this happening. I don't want the police at my house. I don't want to die because I have post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a broken mind. We can't fix it. You can only learn how to cope with it, and sometimes that doesn't even work. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for showing up for this family and their tragedy. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. That morning, or the night that he died, the next morning I got the phone call. I lost my therapist, had to find another therapist, and lost it. So that's what happens when you have PTSD. You lose it a lot, but you can get calmed down if you have people to help you.
You bet. Yeah. This is my sister, Ronda McGowan.
I'm Brian's older sister, and I've often said that I feel like I failed him. I spent a lot of time with Brian after he came back, and I wasn't going to speak today, but I hear all of this, and I have to. There's some points I need to make that a lot of people don't know that the Register Guard has missed, that have been kept hidden, I believe purposefully, by the Eugene Police Department and the former district attorney. It's kind of curious that he left like he did. I have made the statement repeatedly. My brother, 100%, was unarmed when the police were called. He didn't have a gun in his hand. His safe was locked. His actual handgun was outside in his driveway, locked in his pickup. And I looked at Chief Kearns' eyes and I said, Chief Kearns, did your dispatcher report that my brother was unarmed when they called out the police? And he said, no, they did not. And I said, why did they not tell the officers heading to the scene that this was an unarmed man? And he said, well, you know, I have to look out for my officers. That was his answer, liability to his officers. And I just have a real problem with that. There are multiple things in the investigation that have not come out. They had my brother's body laying on the ground for 6 hours. We have video of him lying in a pool of blood and detectives walking over his body. They didn't even put a sheet to cover him. How disrespectful. That was my brother. He served our country. And then after they kept the house for hours, I came in and cleaned my brother. I cleaned him up, what was left in his house. And it was hard, and I prayed the whole time. Many hours later, as I was working through cleaning the house, guess what I found? I looked at the wall and said to my husband, is that a bullet? Oh my God, it is. We went over to the wall and there was a bullet embedded in the wall. Now the detectives told us my brother had to lay there. They were so sorry. They were apologetic, but they were trying to be thorough in the investigation. It was so important. I found that bullet, and it was the bullet that went through my brother's head and killed him. They had had that scene and had my brother lying there for hours, and they didn't even look in the wall and find the bullet. I called them and said, gee, would you guys like to see this bullet? It's here. These guys are really trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, and there's a lot that they are not saying, and there's a lot that they're missaying. And I need everybody to know that. Even the registered guard has missed some points, and we're going to make sure it gets out in the public. You know, mental illness shouldn't be a death sentence. I'm a nurse, and I take care of patients every day that need help, not a SWAT team. And I just thank everybody for coming out here. Obviously, I'm really emotional about it, and you know, I can't help not be. I want justice for my brother, and I want people to feel safe to call the police. I grew up as a little kid, and they were the good guys. I have a son with mental illness. I am worried every single day of my life that if something happens with him, he'll be killed or hurt. So anybody, you know, if you're here, I thank you. Spread the word. We've got to get this stopped. Thank you guys very much.
ETG in terms of the problem. ETG in terms of part of the problem.
I'm going to go ahead and let this gentleman introduce himself because I don't know everybody's name, but I'm very appreciative you were here. Thank you.
My name is Chuck Sturms, Vietnam vet, 6970. I'm 100% disabled, PTSD. I get up every morning and try to do something constructive. Yesterday I was in San Diego and standing on a train station, and a man was on the street acting out. Something happened, not sure. And a policeman walks up, and so I'm not watching the homeless man, I'm watching the policeman. And the policeman watching his nonverbals. What is he doing? How is he approaching this man who is mentally handicapped or disabled or insane? Who knows? Who knows? And as I watched the policeman, he was attempting to de-escalate, not escalate, by what he was doing. This policeman was aware that there was a problem here. And in a short time, this man who was engaging with the policeman walked away, and the policeman walked away, and at least the policeman was smiling. The other man, I'm not sure. So it's possible to engage. It's possible to engage with me. Frankly, I'm a trained professional killer. That was my job. So when a policeman pulls up to me, I'm going to say the same thing that Brian said, even if you have a gun in my face. So you don't want to take us vets on unless you're willing to kill us, unless you're willing to dialogue with us, try to understand us, because my nickname is Fubar, for those of you who understand what that is. So I salute the Babb family for living as my wife and my kids and my grandkids live with me. I'm messed up, but I can function in society and make a contribution here in the community. So don't shoot me. Thank you.
I know we keep coming back to this, but I do have an audio tape of Gardner saying the reason they had to shoot Brian was because he was a veteran and he was a sharpshooter, and that's why they took such precaution. I don't understand that.